Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so Tom King's Batman run is officially over, right? It's officially done. And it's been done for a few weeks, actually. And Tom King's run, a lot of people have found it kind of divisive. I liked it, right? I mean, I thought it was actually a pretty enjoyable run. It was a slow burn. One of the issues that you ran into when it came to Batman and the whole idea with Catwoman and how the two interacted is you had this scenario where it was just kind of like, even for a comic book, they didn't really seem to speak the way people would really talk. One of the things that comic book fans are sticklers about is staying true to a character. Now, for me personally, I don't really care because characters change all the time, right? I mean, it's just the nature of comics. One writer writes a character one way, another writer writes a character another way, and it may be that a new way is a cool way, right? So I mean, just kind of adhering to the idea that things should never change, I think it's kind of bad, right? I think it's an inherently bad thing. If that was the case, Batman would still have the same kind of comics he did back in the 50s, where it's nonsensical and jokey and everything's kind of silly. So, it's cool when characters change and they shift, but there has to be some measure of tangibility there, right? You kind of have to be able to look at how characters talk to each other and then say, okay, so like, this is how people would talk, right? Because usually what we end up doing as comic book readers is we put ourselves in that role, right? So like, they'll read a comic book, like I'll read a comic book and like Batman sounds like me when he talks. I am Batman, but he sounds like me. But that's the kind of issue that you ran into with Tom King's run, is even for a comic book, it didn't seem real, right? It was like watching an Aaron Sorkin show, right? Like The West Wing or The Newsroom, where it's just like everybody's finishing each other's lines, and it's just like nobody talks that way, and it's kind of an interesting little scenario, when it comes to this thing. But what we end up doing is jumping back to Gotham City, and the reason why is because over the course of a little bit of time, essentially Batman had kind of been trained back up again by Selina Kyle. Now, it wasn't really Selina Kyle training Batman to become like better. It was really more of Bruce Wayne getting his skills back, really honing his skills, right? So again, something akin to what we saw in The Dark Knight Returns. This idea of Bruce Wayne kind of building himself back up, getting back to a place where he feels like he could be a reasonable contributor, or at least a reasonable superhero in Gotham, and then going forward from there. And so with Bruce Wayne returning here, initially you've got like Two-Face, and then you've got like Mr. Pig, right? Two villains from the city of Gotham, and both of them are taken out quite readily by Batman. Not only that, Two-Face realizes right off the bat, Batman is back, right? And so with that in mind, you kind of get this interesting exchange where you have Hugo Strange and you've got Thomas Wayne talking to each other on a rooftop, right? And initially Hugo Strange is like, okay, so like Mr. Pig and Two-Face haven't checked in yet. Maybe it's just them doing their thing. They don't really abide by the rules all that often. They're kind of hard to control, and it's not uncommon for them to run late. And Thomas Wayne kind of looking out is just like, Bruce Wayne's back. Like, tell Bane, like Batman is basically back now. And that's literally how this goes. You've essentially got, Batman and Catwoman kind of running through the city of Gotham and taking out taking out like the Mad Hatter and taking out Kite Man. Taking out Kite Man is one of the funniest things, right? Like, cause Kite Man is just kind of like, oh dude, like what in the world? Like, he sees Batman, he's like, you're back, and Batman's like, hell yeah. So I definitely dug that little bit right there. But it's a cool moment here because then you actually have this standoff that goes on between Batman and Hush. But literally what's taking place is this kind of like this fast tracking Batman facing off against all of his villains. Now, if I'm a gambling man, because of the fact that Tom King's run was cut short, I think all this was supposed to be a lot longer, right? It was supposed to be almost kind of like a mini Hush sort of scenario, right? Where you have Batman facing off against all his villains, and each villain gets like a comic unto themselves, right? So Batman and Catwoman versus Scarecrow, and Batman and Catwoman versus the Mad Hatter, and Batman and Catwoman versus Hush, and so on and so forth. And it would have been kind of cool to see, but as it is, his run was cut down to issue number 85, and so it kind of feels like a lot of these things sort of had to be fast tracked and getting up to this moment. And so basically what goes on is Batman's talking to Hush, and he's like, well, I know exactly what Thomas Wayne is going to do. He's in the Batcave, he's going to grab a gun, he's going to go down, and he's going to shoot Damian, right? Because Damian's the hostage now, and the warning is, if I come into Gotham City, Damian's going to die, right? And so it gets kind of nuts here because the initial thought was, holy cow, Damian's going to get killed. But it's kind of cool the way this goes down, because Damian kind of starts to taunt Flashpoint Batman. He starts to taunt Thomas Wayne and basically saying, like, you're not family, like you're not anybody to us. And understand, when it comes to Thomas, he's not some kind of villain who's out there, right? He's not a guy who's just like, I'm going to go start robbing banks and doing these, nonsensical things. I'm going to go steal candy from a baby and snatch women's purses and things like that. That's not really what he is, right? He wants to be the Batman in this universe, or at least at the time that we're getting this bit of a story, he is. And so with that being the case, like, one of the most crushing things to hear is, you're a half measure. You're not Batman, right? You're what Batman could be, if he was like incapable, like if he was totally inept, but like, you're not Batman. Like, you're not Bruce Wayne by any standard of measurement. You're not as capable as a fighter. You're not as smart. You're not as strong. You're not as fast. Like, you don't have any of the resources that he does. You are by no means equivalent to Bruce Wayne in any real form or fashion. And so you get this really, really cool segment here, right? You got Batman taking out all these various forces, and then you get into Thomas Wayne facing off against the Bat family. They get done in like that. It's the craziest thing, right? He takes them out like almost lickety-split. I mean, they do kind of beat the crap out of him a little bit. And there's kind of this discussion that goes back and forth, right? This is interesting to me. There's this discussion that goes back and forth where they're talking about whether to grant mercy or whether to kill him. Alfred's dead. And really, like, it was Thomas Wayne and Bane that killed Alfred. Technically it was Bane, but Thomas Wayne just kind of let it happen, right? He was part and parcel to the death of Alfred. And so the kind of debate that was going on between the Bat family and Damian was, do we tell Bruce Wayne? Do we just off this guy? Like, what do we do here? And initially Damian Wayne wanted to just kill him, right? He's like, just kill Thomas Wayne and be done with it. But the rest of the Bat family is kind of like, well, let's put it to a vote, right? This is not how we normally do things. Let's put it to a vote. And ultimately it was Orphan who cast the winning vote. And so as a result of that, really it seemed like Thomas Wayne was, or at least it looked like he was going to get done in, right? I mean, that kind of seemed to be the case, and where he basically tells the Bat family, fine, you guys want mercy? You guys voted for mercy? Then mercy is what I will give you. And he incapacitates all of them. Like, literally in the span of 2 pages, he takes out the entirety of the Bat family, which is a feat in and of itself, right? Because even though they really kind of have the half-life effect, right? They're trained by Bruce Wayne, but they can never be as good as Bruce Wayne in terms of like fighting skills. They're still quite prodigious, right? Like, the members of the Bat family are some of the best fighters in all of DC Comics, and to be taken out by Thomas Wayne in such a way, it's kind of intriguing because it almost seems to kind of contradict itself. Thomas Wayne is not on the same level as Bruce Wayne, yet somehow is able to take out the whole of the Bat family. I'm kind of curious to see how that was done, right? We don't really get a full-on kind of indication here, but the other part of this, of what we get with Batman, is he's having this conversation with Selina Kyle, right? And what he tells her is everything that's essentially gone on here has kind of all gone as part of their plan. And the reason why was because for Bruce Wayne, when he says it was all part of his plan, it's not really, not really Tom King using a MacGuffin, like Bruce Wayne always wins because he's always prepared for everything that could ever happen, especially the things that he doesn't know about, It's not, I mean, technically that's one of the big fallacies of Batman, but Tom King doesn't really use it in that way. The whole idea here, since the beginning of I Am Gotham and the introduction of Gotham and Gotham Girl, is one, how did they get their powers, right? It's a question that was never answered. We never knew how it was they got their powers. They just arrived one day and they had powers that made them super capable. They had seemingly almost all of Superman's powers, right? So flight, speed, durability, super strength, all that kind of good stuff. Your standard assortment of powers that go to individuals when new characters are being created. But there were a lot of unanswered questions, right? How did Thomas Wayne end up back in that universe? How did Bane manage to rise? What's really going on here? And one of the things that Bruce realizes, he doesn't have the whole picture. He doesn't have it all. Like, what he needed was to get out. He needed to kind of move away from this puzzle so we could look at the puzzle as a whole instead of looking at it piece by piece, right? So almost not being able to see the forest for the trees, if that makes any sense. And so as a result of that, the whole scenario with him facing off against Thomas Wayne, him being defeated by Thomas Wayne, all that kind of stuff, it was all going towards figuring out what the origin of Gotham and Gotham Girl's powers were, that it basically came from this super strong variant of the Venom formula that Bane uses in order to give himself his powers. The notion of like Damian going in and looking like not really looking like a buffoon, but going in headstrong and facing off against Thomas Wayne, getting himself captured, Alfred dying, all this stuff seemed to go according to plan. Now, one thing to understand is Alfred dying was not known by Batman, right? That was not known to be the case. The idea was that Alfred had basically removed the idea of a hostage, and then in turn, Damian more or less, quote unquote, took his place. Damian would basically be able to allow the Bat family in so they could in turn do their thing and essentially take back Gotham City. But that was the nature of it all. Is one of the cool things about this is that Thomas Wayne was in some degree similar to the Batman Who Laughs, not insofar as he was able to perfectly counter every move that Batman could make, but insofar as he could do things that Bruce Wayne wouldn't expect. But then the question has to be asked, if that was the case and Batman was in effect abandoning Gotham in order to basically figure out this great big huge scenario, with the Bat family not being there and so on, did he really just leave it abandoned? And the answer to that question is no. That what he did is he had a safeguard there. He had a person there who was designed to basically keep an eye on Gotham and let Bruce know if things got really, really bad. And what we end up finding out, and this is probably one of the most genius maneuvers by Tom King, what we end up finding out is initially it looked like it was the Joker, right? It was like, okay, so like the Joker's working for Batman now. And given everything that's gone on recently, that's entirely possible, right? You look at everything that Scott Snyder's done since like Dark Knight's Metal and all that, and it's like, okay, I could see the Joker working with Batman and like the Batman Who Laughs and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, well, why in the world would he do that? Well, you end up finding out it's not the Joker. Instead, it's Clayface. And that's genius, right? Because Clayface could do hit and run tactics, right? Like Clayface could sit around and say, okay, so in order to keep the villains from like killing everybody as cops, then what we're going to do is I'm going to pretend to be like this random guy on the street, and I'm going to take out these villains there, and then I'm going to shapeshift into somebody else. And the result is that nobody ever actually knows who's taking these shots. It's the perfect agent of secrecy, a guy who can be anyone. And so basically what ends up happening here is he says things are going to go a certain way. Thomas Wayne is going to do what Thomas Wayne does, but what it's going to do is it's going to set the stage, and it's going to allow us to get directly to Bane himself, and it's going to allow us to face off against Bane, and it's going to let us bring an end to this conflict once and for all. Now the fight, the funny thing about this fight is that initially it's like no masks, right? Bruce Wayne says it's me versus you, right? No masks, no nothing, right? It's just bare knuckle fighting. That's really all this is, right? He's like, Catwoman stays out of it, everybody stays out of it, it's just you and me, which really kind of seems, it really kind of indicates this was designed to be a sort of Bane versus Batman final fight, right? That was really designed to be the case behind all this great big huge final fight between the two. And for the most part, it really seemed to be the case until Bane gets about one punch into it, and then here comes Selina Kyle's whip, which yanks his hand away, and Batman's got some batarangs on his back. And he's basically, you know, and Bane's response was, I thought it was just you and me. And Batman's like, yeah, I lied. And that's, and here's the funny thing about this, right? On one hand, it's cool, but on the other hand, it's kind of like, but would Batman really do that though? That's why it kind of goes, it could kind of go either way, right? That's why I say, this is one of the reasons why Tom King's run was so divisive, right? For those individuals who were like the hardcore Batman needs to kind of always be the way he's been, you know, then it's a hard sell. But for people who are just kind of like, I mean, I can go with whatever, you know, as long as the story's interesting, you know, I mean, if you're like me and you're like, as long as the story's interesting, I don't really care, then it's easy to kind of accept, because it's like, I mean, a smart person would do that. An idiot would not do that, you know. So it makes sense, you know, to see that kind of thing go down. But nonetheless, this whole fight between the two, this is one of the things that I want to talk about here, right? So the idea behind getting the origin of Gotham Girl's powers, right? The origin of Gotham and Gotham Girl's powers was really rooted, or at least came to fruition in this story, when because of the fact that it's a hyper virulent strain of venom, right? Like a super potent strain of venom. If it's exposed to Bane, it would overload his system, right? It'd be like overdosing is really what it would be equivalent to. And so that's literally what happens. I mean, that's the thing. That's why I say it feels kind of rushed, right? Because like 13 pages in, this fight's done. And it's just like, dang. Like, I mean, it happens that fast. I mean, literally like the actual fight, like you get Bane swinging at Batman, Catwoman's whip comes in, so that's page 1. And then you get Batman punching Bane, that's, and then he grabs his batarangs, that's page 2. And then it's I lied, that's page 3. And then it's some back and forth fighting, that's page 4. And then basically like Bane gets hit in the face with one of the batarangs and it starts to overload his system, and that's page 5. And it's just like, wow, I mean, it happens that quick, and it's just like, wow, this is kind of nuts. Now, here's the funny thing about this is that even with him supposedly being overdosed, Bane is still a hoss and still keeps like tearing into Batman, and even Catwoman she's able to hold her own insofar as her lunging after Bane and like slashing him up to pieces, but he sends her flying into a wall. And this is one of the cool things about this, right? Because with Tom King, and it's one of the things people have been wanting to see so far, right? Aside from the I Am Bane story where Bruce Wayne and Bane got into that huge knockdown drag out fight, you haven't really seen Bane and Batman fight that much. And it's one of the things that people want to see, right? When you think of Bane, you think of a guy who's super smart and a guy who could pummel Batman. You know, it's like getting the Incredible Hulk story where the Hulk doesn't do anything, like he doesn't smash anything. He spends the whole time talking. And it's like, well, that's kind of dumb. Like, I want to see this guy like crush Batman. Like, I want to see him fight Batman. Because in a lot of ways, he was the equal of Bruce. Not perfectly, but he was a pretty solid equal and one of his most formidable enemies, right? And so it's kind of crazy because when that happens, as soon as Catwoman's incapacitated, suddenly the venom overdose starts to kick in. And when it does, it starts to slow down Bane. It starts to basically bring him back down. And then in turn, it leaves the opening for Bruce. And Bruce's response initially is, I could kill you for everything that you've done. And the way it's written is like, he wants to. More than anything, he wants to kill Bane for everything that he's done. But also remember, Bruce doesn't know about Alfred yet, right? So everything that Bane's done in terms of turning the city of Gotham upside down, all that stuff, all the torment that he did with Gotham Girl using the Psycho Pirate's Medusa mask, all that stuff, you know, he's like, I could kill you for all of that, but I think that making you suffer is better. I think making you live your life in the face of your failure is better. That knowing when it came down to it, your greatest scheme was not enough to stop me. And so literally he lifts up Bane and breaks his back, or at least goes to break his back. And then in turn, he gets shot by Thomas Wayne. And then Bane himself gets shot by Thomas Wayne. And Thomas says, we've come to the end, fetch the pirate. And that's the cool thing about this, is because what this basically reveals is that none of it was Thomas, like none of it was really Bruce. It was all Thomas. We'll talk about that here in a second. But what I want to do is I want to jump to this next segment here. Now, there's all kinds of words on this page, all that kind of stuff. I want you to ignore that, right? I mean, technically what you have here is you have what's called the children's poem. And the children's poem, there was an interpretation by a guy named Mitchell or something like that, where I think he argued the idea behind the children's poem was that it was designed to kind of show that a father just couldn't protect his kids from the harshness of the world, that the world is harsh and it's difficult and there's really nothing he could do to save them or protect them. At the end of the day, they would succumb to whatever, you know, struggles were out there. They would kind of have to endure those in order to become whatever it is they end up becoming. I mean, that's fine and everything, but I want you to just look at the way this is drawn, right? Because despite all the words on the page, if I'm being honest, they're a distraction. This comic, I think, would have been infinitely better had there been no poems or anything. It had just been like the only speech bubbles that you got, the only thing that you got is when Batman yells Alfred, when he says no, and then when he says Alfred again, and that should be it. That's all it needed to be. And it would have spoken volumes. It would have been fantastic because Bruce Wayne, after basically being shot by Thomas and then waking up, wakes up at the table across from where Alfred's dead body lays. And he looks over there and just sees that Alfred's dead. And he is crushed because the first thing he does, he jumps the table, runs over to Alfred, cradles him, only to realize that Alfred is dead. He picks his body up, he takes it over to the couch, he covers it in his cowl, and then loses it, right? Like on the wall, it just says, "You are not Batman." And he just freaks. Every ounce of anger, every ounce of pain, every ounce of rage just comes to bear when he's like punching a wall, when he's overturning furniture, when he's ripping things up. It's Batman at his most visceral. It's Batman at his most real. That's what made this so impactful, is because you look through a lot of Batman comics, right? You look through like Scott Snyder's run, for example, and it's like Batman being tormented by the Joker or like the Court of Owls or something like that. And it's a combination of, some detective work and some action and Batman's ingenuity and so on and so forth. But this right here is raw. And that's what makes it so good, is because you see the human side of Bruce, right? Bruce Wayne essentially lost the closest thing he had to a father after the passing of his own dad, right? When his dad was shot in an alley. To kind of sidetrack from this for a second, if any of you guys have ever experienced a loss like that, right? Like the loss of a parent or the loss of somebody who was exceedingly close to you, you know what this feels like. There's nothing you can do. And that helplessness turns into rage and it turns into anger. And you would burn the world if you could, right? If you could just set the world on fire and destroy everything, you would, because you're feeling that level of anger and that level of rage and that level of hurt. And that's where Batman is, right? Like he's experiencing this pain that he hasn't experienced since his parents died. And he's told by Selina, he's waiting on you. And when he gets in there, he's standing there with Flashpoint Batman. And it's kind of a crazy thing because he basically says, let's do this, right? And it's like Batman at his most clear. Like notice this moment here, right? He's not like freaking out. He's not like, let's do this. He's not like screaming. It's calm. It's never done. There is no progress. Another year. Like we are the same thing. Like we do the same thing day in and day out. I am definitively Batman. You can call me what you want to, but I'm definitively Batman. Let's do this one more time for Alfred. He's fighting and lashing out with all of his anger and all of his hatred for Alfred. And so what this does is it transitions to essentially the secret origin, more or less, of Thomas Wayne. Now, the way this was written was confusing as hell, and it's a lot easier if you actually go back and you read it backwards, right? If you actually grab this issue, Batman issue number 84, and you read it backwards, and you kind of get this moment where it's like, okay, so you had Thomas Wayne, who was basically there with Bruce Wayne, he was raising Bruce and that kind of a thing, and always wanting a better life for him. And then, of course, as we know from the Flashpoint universe, Bruce Wayne gets shot in Crime Alley instead of Thomas and Martha. And so the result of that is that Thomas Wayne, of course, goes on to become Batman. Martha basically she goes insane and becomes the Joker. And so in that moment, Thomas basically tracks down Joe Chill and beats him to death with a rock. And then after that, Martha Wayne, as the Joker, kills Alfred because she's basically insane. From that point going forward, Thomas Wayne goes on a crusade to kill villains, right? So they basically eliminate all the villains in Gotham City. And then he comes across Selina Kyle in the Flashpoint universe. And Selina Kyle in this universe basically says, if you kill me, that's fine. I don't care. I don't have any family left. No one's gonna know that I died. Just do your thing. And at that point, he brings her in as basically becoming Robin. And so from that point forward, Selina Kyle serves as his Robin. Catwoman is the Robin of the Flashpoint universe, which I don't think we really knew about before. And the two of them are a dynamic duo, right? I mean, facing off against people like Killer Croc, taking out all these folks. It's amazing watching them like go through and just crush seemingly everybody. But then the scenario plays out something akin to the Killing Joke when Catwoman goes to open a door. Basically, Martha's standing there, the Joker's standing there, she pulls a gun and kills Catwoman, right? Shoots her through the stomach and kills her. And at that point, that's when Thomas Wayne really seems to lose all measure of hope and says, like, it's basically pointless, right? Martha Wayne ends up offing herself and is like, this is basically pointless, right? This takes place after the Flashpoint story that we're familiar with. And he says, like, it's all pointless. Like, there's no point to any of this. It's all useless. None of it serves any real purpose. And that's basically it. From there, you basically go into the Flashpoint story where it seemed like the Flashpoint universe was wiped away, but instead it wasn't. The Flashpoint universe continued to exist on. Now, I don't recall exactly why it was that it continued to exist. Maybe that was covered in the button, but the reason why escapes me at the moment. But the Flashpoint universe continues on. From there, it actually turns out that where we initially looked at everything that had gone on with regards to like Doomsday Clock and Thomas Wayne ending up in the main DC universe, we had largely assumed it was Dr. Manhattan or somebody like that. It wasn't. Instead, instead, it was the Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne. Because of the fact that Thomas Wayne killed Eobard Thawne in the Flashpoint universe, Eobard Thawne in turn grabbed Thomas Wayne and brought him to the main DC universe, right? Because Thomas Wayne's statement was, or at least his last kind of wish was, I hope my son doesn't become the same kind of man that I did, right? I mean, because that was one of the things that was revealed during Flashpoint, is that when Barry Allen revealed to Thomas Wayne that in the main DC universe, Thomas and Martha died and Bruce lived on, the wish of Thomas and what he told Batman during the button, was that I hope you go on to become and live a better life than what I did. I hope you don't live your life to some cause of ridding crime or some nonsense like that, send yourself down this terrible spiral. Like, settle down, have kids, live a life that brings you happiness. Like, go do that. And because of the fact that Bruce Wayne never did that, as a moment of torment of sorts, Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne grabbed Thomas Wayne and brought him over to the main DC universe and then left him there. Now, a lot of people would ask the question, isn't Reverse Flash dead? One of the things he says here is, I've got a button that I'm basically, I'm going to find a button, I'm about to catch up with it. So of course, this takes place just before the button, or at least that seems to be the case. But over the course of all this time, since the events, like the one shot of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, Lois Lane and Catwoman, when they were all like hanging out together and they were all like at a fair, that kind of thing, like Thomas Wayne was watching. When Bruce Wayne went to propose to Selina Kyle on the rooftop, Thomas Wayne was watching. He's been watching all this time. He eventually went to Bane and said, I want to help you with this cause to basically dismantle Batman. It's all been the case. That's all been what's going on. And the reason for that is revealed when basically this fight really kind of kicks off between the two of them. And what Thomas says here is, my goal here was to basically make your life miserable. My goal here was to make you so miserable as Batman that you would quit. Right, that you just wouldn't want to do it anymore, right? So like working alongside Bane, engineering all this stuff with Bane, basically going to Bane and saying, hey, look, I know a way where you can destroy the Bat, and all this stuff, everything that's happened since the beginning of Tom King's run up until now was all orchestrated by Flashpoint Batman. It was all orchestrated by Thomas Wayne. And the idea was to basically destroy his son's desire to become Batman so that he would quit and then ultimately settle down and basically go live a normal life. Now, here's the thing about this, right? Because this fight that goes down between the two is pretty straightforward. I mean, it's relative. The comic kind of jumps back and forth through time, right? It goes to like, goes to when the fight takes place and after the fight takes place and different things like that. And you get these kind of small little moments with Selina Kyle and with Batman and so on and so forth. And there's some good moments here and there. But the reality of this is this really kind of split the audience, right? Because I remember looking up reviews for this because I was kind of wondering, I wonder how people view this, right? I wonder how they view this whole thing, this whole scenario and how this ended. And there were some people who were just like, I love the ending. And there were others who were like, this ending sucks. Like it doesn't answer anything, and it's throwaway, and it's obvious it was rushed. Like I saw a lot of people who were really pissed off about it. It was kind of interesting. For me, it's okay. Like it's an okay ending, right? I mean, you get these small little plot threads that wrap up, right? For example, the character of Gotham Girl, if every time she uses her powers, it takes away from her life force, is there a way to get around that? Well, you end up learning that what Bruce had done is he had gone to Superman, who gave him platinum kryptonite, and basically said, here you go, like here's this platinum kryptonite. If you use this, then essentially you'll be able to continue using her powers just like you always did, but you won't have to worry about your life decreasing every time you use your abilities, right? That was kind of the caveat of her character. So essentially Gotham Girl can go forward now as a superhero, and DC can do whatever they want with her, which is probably going to be nothing. But the fact remains, there's some cool moments here. For example, you get a conversation between Batman and Chuck, the two of them just kind of talking, and they're talking about the game and the quarterback and so on, and eventually Selina Kyle joins them. And I mean, you get these small things, but the problem with this is if it doesn't feel impactful, right? It feels like it all just kind of happened so fast. It's just like Bane's defeated in like 5 pages, and then Thomas Wayne's taken out in an instant. And the whole exposition by Batman when he's talking to Thomas Wayne is like, I'm Batman, this is who I am, I choose to live this life, all that kind of stuff. And like, I choose this, you can't change my mind, and I can still be happy. I can have Selina Kyle and have this life at the same time and all those different things. But it kind of seems to lose impact. I don't know, but regardless, I enjoyed it, right? I enjoyed Tom King's Batman run. Like I kind of dug this whole scenario as it went down. But one of the things that comes out of this, or at least seems to come out of it, and it's a little bit sketchy here, right? There's a little bit of uncertainty here. There's a point where it looks like Bane basically breaks the back of Thomas Wayne Batman, when he's in a hospital, right? When he's just kind of laying there in the hospital, and that's basically it. But it also indicates that Thomas Wayne could just continue on. Right now, we don't know how much of this stuff that Tom King has introduced, or at least written about in his comic, is going to carry on into James Tynion's run. We don't really know at the moment, right? We kind of have to wait to see what it is that Tynion wants to do. There are elements elements here that I would love to see continue on. And there are elements here where it's just like, okay. You know what I mean? That was kind of the crazy thing. When it came to Scott Snyder's Batman, you didn't really see a whole lot of reference to the Court of Owls when Tom King took over, right? So, you know, that's kind of the nature of comics, is that one writer takes over. Sometimes they continue on what other writers did. Sometimes they wipe it all clean and start fresh. You know, it really kind of depends. But regardless, it was cool. I enjoyed it, right? I had a good time reading this. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.